How's everybody doing? Good. Yeah, can we give it up for the band? They did a really good job. Thank you for them. Very cool. So here we are, another year of youth camp, another theme, Captivated. This week we're going to spend some time learning about what it means to be captivated. And right now, do you need me to be turned down a little bit? Are you guys okay? Is this okay? Is this too loud? I just feel like I'm super loud. Okay, good. As long as my ears are bleeding, it's fine. Okay, so, it's summer. How many of you guys like going to the drive-in? Oh, yeah! Yes. The drive-in. How many of you are more like movie theater people? Movie theater people? Yeah, okay. So we got movie theater people, make some noise. We got drive-in people, make some noise. Okay, drive-in, so much better. I'm not gonna lie. I love going to the drive-in, especially in the summer. Okay, but for some reason, when you go to the drive-in, people think they need to leave within the last 7 minutes of the movie. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Like the last 7 minutes of the movie. Like the movie is still going. It's still black outside. The only light that's coming is from the moon and from the movie, and all of a sudden, all of the rednecks decide they're going to start their monster trucks, okay? And they're going to turn on their high beams, and they're going to leave with 7 minutes left in the movie, and it's pretty much the most distracting thing ever, right? Because we actually, normal people, we want to see the last 7 minutes of the movie. Okay, we don't need to get to some tractor haul or something, okay? We want to see the movie, okay? And so it's distracting. We've all been there, done that. We've all been in the movie theater, and the guy right in the middle of the movie theater thinks he has to crawl over everybody. I went to see a movie a couple weeks ago, and the people right in front of me, okay? I was like, oh my word, I'm just losing my patience here, okay? They were up and back and forth a million times, and it's the most distracting, most annoying thing ever. Now, we've all been down there. We've all been there. Okay, we've all done that. And I say all of that to say, do not make this place, okay, like the drive-in or like the movie theater, okay? Do not be distracting. Don't be that person that has to start their monster truck, okay, right in the middle of everything that's going on. Okay, so you don't have to go to the bathroom a million times when we're in here. We're good. Okay, we're all past the age of 12 or 13, hopefully, okay? And so we can hold our bladder by now, I hope. So you don't have to go in and out, okay? It's very distracting. So whenever somebody is up here, whether it's in the morning rally or it's an evening rally, do your best to give them all your attention. Does that make sense? Are we all good? We all on the same page there? Okay? Good. So everybody now go ahead and sit up in your chairs. Sit up in your seats. Okay? Don't be too comfy. Sit up. Sit up. This is the time to get out your notes and your books and your Bibles and all that kind of good stuff. And if you're timing me, don't time me then, because that wasn't a part of anything I'm about to say. Okay? That was just for free, so you're welcome. So, this year, Captivated 2017, there are a few things that our world is really good at being captivated by on social media, the news, all of us, texting, cell phones, all that kind of good stuff. We're captivated by all of these different things. Well, at the end of 2016 and into the beginning of 2017, there is a person, one person, that captivated all of our attention. Okay, this one person also had one very famous phrase. And many of you are thinking of lots of people, lots of phrases, but this person, right here, there's a picture, yeah. Okay, we know. And if you were in Excel, you know that I already talked about her. So I'm not going into detail about her, okay, because I have some better things to talk about. But that captivated our attention, right? And you get the picture. You're like, oh yeah, this is what it means to just be totally obsessed with something. Okay, we were totally obsessed with this girl and what she said for ever, and it was ridiculous. Well, in 2015, there was something that came out that was even bigger than this girl and her saying that took over social media, that took over the news, that basically captured the attention of the entire world. Okay, and it was actually an article of clothing. Okay, yes, okay, some of you in here, you know. And we're going to test this, okay, because in 2015 it became this uproar. Is the dress either black and blue, or is it gold or we're just going to take a color test. Okay, how many of you think this dress is yellow and gold?
White.
Oh, white and gold, thank you. How many of you think? Yes, okay, I am with you. Okay, I think when I look up here, I see white and gold. Obviously, right? We're normal human beings. It's white and gold. Now, how many of you, when you look at that, you see black and blue? What? My mind is blown. Because for real, I'm looking at this going, it's obviously gold and white. Like, it is gold and white. Now, this dress, yeah, see, you're all already up in an uproar about this, okay? This dress captured the attention of so many people. And not just like, oh yeah, we talked about it on social media for a little bit. No, we had psychologists, doctors, okay, that started studying how people interpret color and how people's brains interpret color differently. And so they actually spent money and time trying to figure out, now doing all these studies on how people see things. And I'm going to tell you right now, for all of us that see gold and white, obviously we need to go to some psychologists, okay? Because it's actually black and blue, okay? Black and blue. That's a little better, but I still see yellow and white and gold, okay? I'm not going to lie. Still see white and gold. I don't get it. It's technically black and blue, so all of you in here that see black and blue, I guess you're normal. I don't know. I don't really know what that means. All I know is that this dress, okay, it got a lot of people's attention. And it held a lot of people's attention for a very long time. We as humans, it's really easy for us to be captivated by things of this world. And sometimes when I think about what does it mean to be captivated by God, sometimes it's hard to understand, but just think of these things. Think of this girl in this dress. Social media, all of a sudden, as soon as all this stuff starts blowing up, we're captivated by it, right? We're just into it. We're totally immersed into it. We just need to think about it. We need to send it. We need to make jokes about it. Everything about it. That's all we're thinking about. And then until the next thing comes up. In life, all of us are captivated by something. But what does it mean to be captivated by God? And where do we start? This week, we're going to look at the life of Paul. And we're going to learn about this man and his example of what it means to be captivated by God. There are so many amazing, incredible people in the Bible that we can learn from, but this week we're going to look at the life of Paul. And in order to know how this man was captivated, we first have to take a look at his life, his backstory a little bit. Maybe some of us, we know a lot about Paul, maybe some of us don't really know about Paul at all. But I'll tell you that a few things about Paul is that Paul, actually his name was Saul. Okay, so some of you go by a nickname. Well, Paul's real name was Saul, and he later would get the name Paul when he became a Christian. But for the sake of not getting confused like 40 times during my message, okay, I'm just going to refer to him as Paul. Okay, so you have to be like, is it Saul? Is it Paul? What is it? I don't know. Okay, it's Paul. We'll just go with that, okay? But as long as you know for the test that he first was named Saul, we'll be okay. And when Paul was 13 years old, he went to school just like any good Jewish boy, and he learned about Jewish law and traditions. But what we need to keep in mind is that by the time that Paul went to school, the law didn't still have the same effect on the Jews as it had in the past. Because Paul was around after Jesus had already come, he had already died on the cross, he had already rose from the grave, and so therefore Jesus came and he fulfilled that law. Which meant that they no longer had to live how they had lived in the past. But even though this was the truth, and even though Jesus had come and had fulfilled the law, not all of the Jews believed this. And Paul and his family would have been people, would have been Jews, that didn't believe that Jesus was Savior, that didn't believe that Jesus was Messiah, and because of that, they thought that everybody else still needed to live by the law. How many of you have ever heard the phrase, you're doing more harm than good? Anybody ever heard that phrase, you're doing more harm than good? Yeah, okay. So, when I think of you're doing more harm than good, some of you are going to be like, oh wow, you're so heartless, okay? When I think of people that are really doing more harm than good, and I can't believe I say this, I think of 5-year-olds that want to bake chocolate chip cookies, okay? That is what I think about when I think about somebody who's really just like, making more of a mess than making something awesome. and maybe I'm just like a heartless person. Okay, I didn't really hear anybody say "ah" though, so maybe nobody really cares. They're like, oh, 5-year-olds, whatever. Okay, but what I'm thinking is, they make a mess, right? You're trying to make chocolate chip cookies, but for real, if you have younger siblings or cousins, you know that you end up having eggshells in your batter, there's flour all over the floor, there's flour all over their face, okay? And really, it's just a situation where they're just doing a lot more harm than they are good. And Paul, he was this man who thought he was doing a lot of good for God, but in reality, he was doing a lot more harm. In Acts chapter 7, we find Paul, so if you have your Bibles, this is the time you can open them up and turn there. In Acts chapter 7 is when we first learn about Paul. We find a man named Stephen and a young man named Paul. And Stephen would have been the kind of man that Paul and his family would have very strongly disliked. Because Stephen was a part of the church. Stephen loved God. Stephen knew that Jesus really came and died on the cross for their sins, and because of that, he was living in that way. He was living in the new way. He was no longer living as a slave to the law. But this man, Stephen, people heard about what he was saying, and because they didn't like what he was saying, they brought him in front of these leaders. And so the leaders asked Stephen what he was proclaiming, and he told them the truth. He told them the truth that Jesus was the Messiah, that he had come, that he had died, that he had rose, and he stuck up for what he believed in. And because of that, Stephen, in that very same day, would be taken out into the streets, and he would be beaten, and he would be stoned, and he would be murdered for sticking up for what he believed in. He'd be murdered for confessing that Jesus really was Lord, and that Jesus really was Savior, Jesus really was Messiah. And in the midst of this, in the midst of the stoning of Stephen, we find Paul. Paul wasn't throwing a rock. Paul probably wasn't really even saying a word. Paul was just kind of on the outskirts, watching what was going on. But even though Paul never threw a stone, what he did was just as bad. In Acts 7, it says, "And there was Paul approving of their killing." So Paul had become this man. He had become this leader that was a part of persecuting Christians. And Stephen would have been the first one that Paul saw persecuted, that Paul saw murdered. And there was something inside of Paul that stirred when he saw Stephen. When he saw Stephen out there in the street being murdered, there was something that stirred inside of him. There was something inside of him that longed to see more of this. And as sick and as twisted as it was, Paul had this thought, this idea. He began to think, in order for the law, in order for people to live the way that they really should live, we need to do this to everybody that believes that Jesus is the Messiah. We need to do this to everybody who believes that Jesus is Savior. And at the beginning of Acts 8, it says, on that very same day, the very same day that Stephen was stoned, it says a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem. And godly men buried and mourned Stephen's death. But Saul, he began to persecute Christians. He began to destroy the church. He went from house to house, and he dragged both men and women and put them into prison. Paul didn't just go for the men, but he went for the women. He was low, the lowest of the low, men and women. He ripped them out of their house. They took them to prison. They persecuted them for how they believed in God. Paul, this man, who first we see him, the very first time we're introduced to him, he's simply standing by the sidelines. He's in agreement as to what's going on, but he's on the sidelines. And then, with just a matter of a few verses, he was no longer on the sidelines, but he was right in the middle of what was happening. He was actively going from house to destroy those who lived a life for God. So this is Paul. Some of you that have never heard the story of Paul, you're thinking, yikes, what are we going to learn about this guy for? And even some of you that know the story of Paul, maybe didn't know how bad it really was. It was pretty bad. He was okay to just rip men and women out of their homes and persecute them just for believing in Jesus. Why would Paul go to this extreme? What was in Paul that really pushed him over the edge? What really caused Paul to go in so very deep? It was the fact that he was captured by his longing. Many times in life, we aren't captivated by God. Catch this. Many times in life, we aren't captivated by God because we're captured by our longings. We're captured by our longings. Paul isn't the only one who longed for something bigger than himself. Paul isn't the only one that had this emptiness in his soul that he just needed to satisfy. Paul wasn't the only one that just longed for he just had this void in his heart and he just needed to figure out how to fill it. All of us were human. We're all born human. Even if we have 6 toes, I hear it's possible. Okay, you're still human. All of us in this room, we're humans. And as humans, we're born into 2 things. 1, we're born into sin. And 2, we're born with a longing. As humans, we're born with 1, sin, and 2, a longing. All of us in here are born into sin, and we can't escape it because right in the beginning of Genesis, the very first book in your Bible, it says that Adam and Eve, they messed up big time, and because of that, sin would always be a part of the picture as long as the human race was being born on earth. Sin would be a part of our picture. All of us were born into sin. But not only are we born into sin, but we're born with a longing. Man has a hole in his heart that was created to be filled only by God. When Adam and Eve were made, they were created to know God. Their job was to take care of the animals and take care of the land, but their purpose for life was to know God. And just like Adam and Eve, the very first human beings, we as human beings, our purpose in life is to know God. And so that longing in our soul, and some of you, I know, we all feel it. We've all felt it. We have this longing. We have this void. And for centuries, people, they've made up gods. They've worshipped idols. They've offered up sacrifices to these gods that they've created. Why? Because they have a longing. They have a hole. They have an emptiness in their heart. And they're doing everything that they possibly can to fill that void. And today, it's no different. Today, it's no different. All of us, we have this hole in our heart. We have this longing in our soul. And today, a lot of us, we do a good job of filling it with drugs and immoral behavior and bad habits and technology, and yes, even Netflix, because I'm going to tell you the things that we do to fill that longing aren't always bad things. Wanting to spend time with friends, that's not a bad thing. Wanting to hang out and go get to the mall and go get new shoes, that's not a bad thing. But when we need more shoes, we need more friends, we just need the better phone, we just need to watch one more episode. All of these things that we do, we do to try to fill a hole. And I'm just going to tell you right now, none of this stuff will ever satisfy your heart. None of this stuff will ever satisfy your hole. Nothing in this world can satisfy our hunger. There's this lady in John 4 who went to the well to get a drink of water. And guess who she ran into, just so casually at the well? Jesus. There he was sitting at the well. I'm sure you guys don't go to the gas station and just randomly run into Jesus. Okay, this was like what she's doing. Randomly just going to the well. She needed some water. And who was there? Jesus. He was sitting there. And they were talking. They're having some conversation. And Jesus turned and he looked at her and he says, everyone who drinks the water from this well, they're going to be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water that I give them, they'll never be thirsty again. Jesus wasn't saying this just because the woman wanted a drink of water. Jesus was telling the woman this because Jesus knew this woman's story. He knew that she was a woman that was trying to fill that void. She was trying to fill that longing, trying to fill that hunger. She was filling it with men and husband after husband and man after man, and she just couldn't get enough to fill that void. Jesus knew her story. And he said, when you fill your life up with me, you'll never be thirsty again. You will never be thirsty. So what about you? What about me? Paul had his gruesome story. What satisfied the heart of Paul, as weird as it sounds, was seeing Christians be killed and persecuted. What filled the emptiness of this woman's life was man after man. So what is it for you? What are you watching? What are your habits? What relationships? What are you doing? What are we doing to fill our hearts, to fill our souls, to fill that longing, to fill that void? What is your thing? What is your story? Every single one of us in here, we have it. And to that story, Jesus says, whoever drinks my water, they'll never be thirsty again. Jesus said, when you fill your life with me, when you fill your life spending time with me, when you fill your life reading your Bible, when you spend your time praying and with Christian influence, when you fill up your life with me, you'll never be empty. Because all these things we do to fill our longing is as silly as trying to pour yourself a glass of water into a cup with a ton of holes in it, okay? Nobody wants to drink from a strainer. It's impossible. You can't do it. Jesus is saying, basically, when we fill our lives with all these things, we're just filling up our souls. Like we'd be filling up a strainer, trying to drink. It's not going to do. It's not going to work. Jesus said, who comes to me, his cup will be full. And not only will it be full, but it will run over. In order to be captivated, we first need to realize that we have an emptiness in our soul. There's a longing in our soul. We've all felt it. Maybe some of you in here, you're still feeling it. All of us were created with this hole in our hearts. And how do we fill it? How do we satisfy the longing? The only thing that will satisfy that longing is Jesus. So one, we're not captivated because first, we're captured by our longings, and two, we're captivated only because of Jesus. Paul was filling his dark and empty hole with all of the wrong things. He had this longing and he couldn't fill it. He was hungry, but he stayed hungry. He couldn't fill the hunger. He couldn't quench his thirst. Before you knew it, Paul was very quickly believing all the lies of the devil. The devil had tricked Paul into thinking that, oh, Paul, if you just kill one more Christian, if you just persecute one more Christian, if you just take one more Christian off to jail, your heart will be full, it'll be satisfied, it'll be great. Lie after lie, person after person, nothing could fill the heart of Paul because the devil had so easily tricked him. He had tricked him into thinking he was doing good. Now, I would not say to you that I was a super gullible person, okay, because I don't want to be known as that. But I will say that I am tricked very easily sometimes, especially when my brain is very tired, okay? And so last year, there was an instance, and it was actually right here at camp, and it was after all of you guys had already went back to your rooms, and you're supposed to be sleeping, but we really know you're just drinking, like, Red Bull and staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's almost time for breakfast. But the rest of us, leaders, some of us are sitting in here like zombies, staring at the wall, because it had been a full day of camp. Okay, we're tired, we're old, so we kind of get tired. And so I was in here, some of us were in here, and Pastor Byron was in here, and we were all kind of hanging out. And Pastor Byron, I'd only known him for like a couple weeks, but he had this really cool magic trick that he wanted to show. And I was like, yes! Okay, when I get really tired, I also get very like crazy. And so I'm crazy, and I get tricked very easily, and my brain is just mush. And so, you want to show me this magic trick? And I was like, yes, I want to see this magic trick. Joe, I'm not going to tell you how this magic trick ends because you're going to want to see it later. And some of you are going to be like, wow, she fell for that? Yes, I did. But this magic trick, so I'm standing there, I'm tired, remember it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and he tells me he can make a quarter disappear into his elbow. And in that moment, I became like a 3-year-old child. And I was like, yes, make it disappear into your elbow. And so he gets a quarter, he puts up his arm, he twists it into his elbow, and then all of a sudden it goes like this, and I'm like, oh, it's gone! It was nuts, okay? It was absolutely crazy, and I promise you, it's probably still in his elbow, because it's just like, I don't know how he did it, okay? It was insane, it was nuts. And so here I was, everybody else is watching this happen, and they're like, wow, Tori, really? And I'm like, yes, really! And I'm like going nuts, have no clue how he did it, like absolutely just freaking out. And then finally he shows me how he did it, and I'm like, still, that is incredible, it's awesome. But I was tricked, I was fooled so very easily. And Paul, here he was tricked, and he was fooled so very easily. But he wasn't tired. He knew exactly what he was doing. The devil had tricked him into thinking he was doing the right thing for God. And if we're not careful, all of us in here will easily be tricked by the devil into thinking that we're doing exactly what we should be doing. We do a good job at talking about how God has a plan for our lives. And it's true, he does. God has a very good plan for all of our lives. But to that, I would follow up with, the devil also has a plan for our lives. And his plan is pretty simple. And it's just to destroy us. It's to destroy who we are, who we could be, who God wants us to be. And he will do everything in his power to trick us into his plan, so eventually we will be destroyed. And before you know it, you've been tricked enough, and now you got swarmed up into this idea of the devil, and you don't know how you got there. All of a sudden you're in the pit, all of a sudden you're in the belly of the lion, and you're looking around thinking, I don't even know how I got here. And I'll tell you how you got there. You got there because you're lazy in your relationship with Jesus. And you didn't even see it coming. When we get lazy in our relationship, when we fill our longings with all the wrong things, that's when Satan just tiptoes in. Before we know it, we don't even know what hit us. We don't even know what happened. And this was Paul's life. He didn't even know what happened. But here he was. We're obviously learning about Paul, so Paul didn't stay in the pit. He didn't stay in the belly of the lion. Because God's plan for Paul's life, even though Paul had been following the wrong plan for a long time, God's plan for Paul's life would prevail. And I want to read this to you because this is where Paul's life gets really awesome. This is where it gets really interesting. This is where we're like, yes, okay, now we can follow Paul. We can learn from Paul. And in Acts 9, it talks about how Paul, he is now on this journey to Damascus because he wasn't satisfied persecuting the Christians in his own city. No. Now he had to go to a whole new city. He had to go to a whole new place that had thousands more Jews that he could just take out of their homes and throw them into prison. And so his longing, it began to grow. So much so that it pushed him out of his own city. And now he was on this road to Damascus that would take him into this new city. And so this is what it says. It says, as he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. And he fell to the ground and he heard a voice say to him, Paul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Paul asked. I am Jesus, who you are persecuting, he replied. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. And the men who were traveling with Paul stood there. They were speechless because they had heard the sound, but they hadn't seen anyone. Paul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he was blind. He couldn't see. So they led him to Damascus, and for 3 days he was blind. And he didn't eat, and he didn't drink a thing. This was Paul's moment. He had filled his longings. He was in the belly of the devil. This was Paul's moment. This was Paul's moment of correction and redirection. In order for us to be captivated by God, we have to be open to the correction and the redirection of Jesus. Write that down. If you haven't written anything down yet, write that down. In order to be captivated by God, we have to be open to the correction and redirection of Jesus. This was Paul. Here he was. Open to the correction and the redirection of Jesus. The Bible tells us, obviously, we just read it, he's blind. This light was so bright from heaven that he was blind. Now, some of us, we know, we look into the sun and we immediately regret our decision because we look away and we're blind for like 2.5 seconds, and it's the worst 2.5 seconds of our lives. But not, this light was brighter than the sun. This light was brighter than anything we have ever seen. It was so bright that it blinded Paul. Not only did it blind him because it was so bright, but I'd like to think that one of the reasons that this light was so bright and that Paul was blinded by God was so that for 3 days, Paul had this constant reminder of who God was and how very far away Paul had gotten. For 3 days he didn't eat. For 3 days he didn't drink. He was tired. He had been on this trip. I just wonder what went through his head. He had just gotten this new command from God. Go to Damascus, they'll tell you what to do. Basically his new mission, well, from now on, Paul, you're going to preach the gospel to all those people you've been persecuting. Yeah, now you're going to be one of them and you're going to preach the gospel. And so he had just gotten this new command from God. And in his head for 3 days, I just wonder what he's been thinking. He's upset. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't drank anything. He's blind. And I just wonder for those 3 days, was he thinking about Stephen? Was he thinking about the example of Stephen and the love and the grace that Stephen had? Was he thinking about all those people that he had dragged out of their houses and thrown into prison? I think in these moments it dawned on Paul who he had become and the truth of who God was. And for 3 days, Paul had nothing to see and nothing to look at. And for 3 days, all he had in his head was the memory of Jesus. All he had for 3 days in his head to truly think about, to truly dwell on, was that of Jesus. For us, when we're truly captivated by God, the only face we want to see is Jesus. The only water that we want to drink is that comes from Jesus. The only bread we want to eat is from Jesus. The only thoughts that we want to think are what are pleasing to Jesus. And the only songs that we want to sing are praises back to Jesus. Only when we see Jesus are we open to the correction and redirection of God. And in order to be totally captivated by God, in order to totally be captivated by God, we first have to look into the face of Jesus. In order to be captivated by God, we first must look into the face of Jesus. Which brings us to our third point of turn your eyes to Jesus and forever be captivated by God. In Acts 9, we see what happens to Paul. Paul, after he got his sight back, he went crazy. Not really. He went crazy for God. He was ready to accept this mission. The Bible tells us that he was baptized, and it says at once he began to preach the gospel. At once! He was so excited. He was so ready. He was ready to do what God had called him to do, that it was immediate. It was urgent. He was ready to now become the person that God had created him to be. Paul was now changed, and there was nothing that was going to take him back to where he had been. Because he had seen Jesus, and because of that, he was totally sold out for God. And the rest of this week, we're going to learn about how Paul, in that one moment, he made that decision to change his life forever, that forever, from that point on, he would be totally captivated by God. That he would forever spend his days preaching the gospel, traveling around, telling other people about Jesus. He would spend the majority of his Christian life in prison and in house arrest because he believed in God. But through all of it, through all of his circumstances, through all of his trials, Paul never looked back because he had seen the face of Jesus. Some of you this week, you're not going to be sold on the idea of being captivated by God simply by the life of Paul. Some of us think, well, I've heard about Paul since I was a kid, or people in the Bible were holier than I was. It's not true. Paul's life will teach us what it means to be captivated by God. But there are two stories that I want to share with you before we wrap up. There are two stories that kind of bring this idea and what kind of people we need to be in order to be captivated by God. When I was a kid, I still went to a church where they sung hymns. And many of you just heard the word hymns, and all of a sudden you just rolled your eyes, or some of you were like, I don't even know what a hymn is, and you couldn't even say one line of a hymn. And when I was a kid, I was very much like that. I was very foolish and thought hymns are really silly. Why are we still singing them? They're for my grandma, and is God really even going to teach us something, because these are really boring. Okay, they're really boring hymns. Well, a couple years ago, the Lord convicted my heart and taught me something new. A few years ago, I was in a worship setting, and the worship leader came up onto the stage, and he said, today, all we're going to sing is hymns. And immediately, sunk into my chair. I was an adult. I knew better, okay? But I was just like, oh my word, I don't want to do this, right? Because they're hymns. He said, but it's going to be different. Today, we're either going to watch a short video of the history of the hymn, or somebody's going to come up and they're going to read the history of these hymns. And I thought, well, okay, well, at least I'll learn a history lesson if nothing else. And so the first video came up on the screen, and we sang the hymn. Then a person came up and read a little history, and we sang the hymn. And then we got a couple hymns in, and my heart had begun to soften. Okay, the Lord had spoken to me. And we were a couple hymns in, and all of a sudden, the story came up on the screen, and I'm going to read it to you. And it was about a man named Horatio G. Spafford. And in the 1800s, in 1871, he was a very successful lawyer and businessman in Chicago. He had a wife, Anna, and they had 5 kids. They ran into their first tragedy when their son, their youngest son, got pneumonia and died. And in the same year, his very successful business would be taken up in the Chicago fire. But through it all, him and Anna, his wife, and his family, they would press on. They would still work. They would still look to God in the middle of their difficult circumstances. Then 2 years later, their family decided to take a trip to Europe. Keep in mind, this is the 1800s. They had to go on a big boat. So last minute, Horatio, because of business, he could not go on this trip. But he said, I'll meet up with you later. And so he sent his wife, and now only his 4 girls, across the ocean. Well, 4 days in to their voyage, their ship collided with another ship, and within minutes sank to the bottom of the ocean. And in that ship were many people, but Horatio's 4 daughters wouldn't make it. They would go down with the ship. Thankfully, Horatio's wife, Anna, would be saved. She had found some debris and was floating. And they saved her, and they took her back to Europe. And so she sent a telegram to her husband. She sent a message to him, and she said, "I've been saved alone, and I don't know what to do." So Horatio, like any good husband, did the best that he could to get over to Europe. And 4 days into his trip, the captain pulled him up on deck, and he said, "Horatio, I just want you to know, even though this may be difficult, I just want you to know that this is the spot where the ships collided, and this is the spot where your 4 daughters died." And in that moment, this is my favorite hymn, so I get a little emotional. But in that moment, Horatio wasn't angry at God. He probably had some questions. He was obviously very upset. His 4 daughters had just died. But the very first words out of Horatio's mouth, maybe some of you have heard this hymn before, he said, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, and when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, whatever my circumstance, God, you've taught me to say, it is well with my soul." And ever since then, I've looked at hymns completely different, because they all have a story like this. They all have a story of men and women that could write things like this because they were totally captivated by God. Now I have one more story for you. One more story to really bring this idea home, because this was the 1800s, right? A really long time ago. The last story that I want to share with you guys is about a young Wesleyan pastor. He's just a few years older than me. He has the same story like a lot of your youth pastors and the people of your church. He went to Southern Wesleyan. He graduated from there just a few years ago. He moved to Indiana with his wife. And there in Indianapolis, he and his wife Amanda would spend 3 years building a church, ministering to Indianapolis. There's a picture. You can go ahead and throw that up there. And in that time, they would have a 3-year-old son. In 2015, Davy's world would change forever. Because in November of 2015, Davy was out, he went to the gym. He's just living life. They were living life, doing their normal thing. And he came home and he found Amanda lying on the floor, and she had been shot. And so here was Amanda, their precious new little baby, and within 24 hours, she was rushed to the hospital, and within 24 hours, she passed away. Now this story, it hits close to home. Wesleyan pastor, our denomination, he's a lead pastor, he's only a couple years older than me. This is real life, this is now, this is today. This isn't 100 years ago, a couple thousand years ago, this is like a year and a half ago. This is real life. And this is what Davy said as he now only has his son, he lost his wife. In the midst of this tragedy, this is what he says. He says, "Since that day, my son and I have been walking a road I would have never chosen for us or for anybody else. But before Amanda's death, my wife had created quite a business restoring old furniture and home decor. She believed nothing was wasted and anything could be restored into a treasure. Now I spend every waking moment following Jesus into his plan to restore this tragedy into something beautiful. My story is played out in the light of a greater story, Jesus' story, and Scripture tells me that Jesus' story, nothing is wasted, even the most tragic of situations." I really wanted to wrap this idea tonight up with these stories, especially the story of Davy, because Davy is a guy, I look at him and I say, wow, That's a man who's doing it alone. He has a kid. He's still a lead pastor, still has a heart for Indiana, still is growing his church, preaching every Sunday. And to me, I look at that and say, wow, that is a man who's captivated by God. Because there was no circumstance, nothing that was too bad for him to say, wow, God, forget it. What's the point? He has obviously looked into the face of Jesus. Horatio obviously knew what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus. Paul literally looked, was blinded by Jesus. Tonight starts off this week. We're going to continue to learn what it means to be captivated. We're going to continue to learn about the life of Paul. But I'm telling you right now that the rest of this week doesn't matter until you first have looked into the eyes of Jesus. Some of you sitting in here, you've been saved since you were a little kid. You're still going strong, and that's awesome. And some of you in here remember the last time that you spent with God. You don't remember the last time you actually opened up your Bible. It's probably maybe you've been collecting some dust. And some of you in here, maybe you've never looked to Jesus ever. Maybe you've never even had that moment of asking him to be a part of your life. And tonight, this is what's going to happen. The band's going to come out, and, surprise, we're going to sing a hymn. And this hymn is very easy. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. And in these moments, that's what I want you guys to do. I want everybody to go ahead and just close your eyes, bow your heads. And for those of you who are sitting in this room and you're thinking, I know Jesus, but I haven't spent time with Jesus in a really long time. I don't even remember what he looks like. Don't even remember who he wants him to be. To you, I would say, I want you to take these next few minutes and I want you to talk to God. I want you to tell him, I'm sorry I haven't looked into your face for a while. I'm sorry I haven't spent time with you in a while. This is your moment to get right with God. And we don't do this to cause some emotional wave. We do this as a chance for you to truly, before heading into this week of growing and learning and being challenged together, to truly search your hearts and to see where you're at. And there's some of you in this room, you're sitting here, and maybe, like Paul, you've just believed the lies of the devil. You've been feeling that longing in your heart with all the wrong things, and all of a sudden, you're now in this place where you never thought you would be, and you don't know how you got there. And you never really ever had a moment with Jesus. And tonight, it's my prayer that for you, that this would be your Damascus Road. That this would be your Damascus Road moment. That for those in here who've never asked Jesus to come into their heart and to come into their life and to fill that void, to fill that emptiness, to fill that longing, I want you to pray and I want you to mean it. If you've heard this message and you've been stirred and you feel God talking to you right now, I just want you to close your eyes, nobody looking around. If you've never prayed and asked Jesus to come and be a part of your life, and right now in this moment you want that. You know that you're a sinner, you want him to forgive you from your sins. But I just want you to say this prayer in your head to yourself. You can repeat it after me. Just say, Dear God, God, I know that I am a sinner. I know that I have done wrong. But tonight, I'm taking a stand. Tonight, Jesus, I believe in you. I believe that you love me. I believe that you died for me. I believe that you rose for me. Come into my life. Make me new. Amen.